Hi, my name is Andy. I am the head trainer and managing director of Able Training Support Limited. I thought I'd do a bit of a chat today, looking at language within the health and social care sector. It's one of those that I've found changed dramatically over the years in a number of different areas, and for me, language is really quite important. I think language can very much change our perspectives and our view around certain subjects and how we may assess or discuss certain topics around the language itself of what we use, certain terminology. One of the big ones, obviously, Able Training, one of our specialist subjects is around difficult behaviour or conflict management and managing violence and aggression. And this is one that over the years I found the terminology has changed quite considerably. So once upon a time, the subject always used to be referred to as managing challenging behaviour. That always used to be the course. We changed the terminology over time. The preferred term in some groups is managing behaviour that challenges. Now that's quite a significant difference, even though it sounds like there's only one word, but it's, if we're arguing semantics, but there is a big difference between the two. Other terminology that seems to be liked now, depending on the organisation or the setting you're in, is behaviours of concern is currently one way that certain difficult behaviours are referred to, which I get. I think it sounds very low level. I don't always know whether sometimes it gives a severity of certain behaviour. Hazardous behaviour is another term that's sometimes used, but there's some that feel that's quite a negative terminology and got some negative connotations to it. And it may not describe it all, because not all behaviour that we may find difficult to work with is necessarily dangerous or hazardous in some way. Another one is distressed behaviour. I come across an awful lot in sort of elderly care settings when working with the Alzheimer's Society, that we hear this term, distressed behaviour. But there's also terms that aren't liked, and one of them is things like violence in care, or referring to violence within health and social care settings. I think, and I understand from one point of view, that immediately could be perceived as judgmental and negative towards the person who's displaying that if it's something like dementia or autism, it's something having a meltdown, we describe it as violence, then are we then being judgmental and stigmatizing? But I think we need to be very careful that doesn't need to be. We're not then necessarily judging the behaviour, it's the action itself. If I'm being punched in the face, that is violence towards me. That doesn't mean I'm judging the cause of the behaviour or judging the person displaying that behaviour, but it's still a definition of what is happening, especially under the health and safety executive kind of definition of what violence is. The term challenge behaviour to manage your behaviour that challenges, though, let's explore that for a moment. And it's lost some of its impact because it's kind of overused a little bit. But I'd say that the definition of what is challenging behaviour is non-exhaustive, and it's a very personal thing. It's what you find challenging. So whether you're a parent finding your child's behaviour challenging, or a partner finding your partner's behaviour challenging, or whether you're working in a care sector or a teacher that finds the students' behaviour challenging, the important thing is you're finding it challenging. So certain behaviour could be, say, it's hazardous, could be detrimental to their health, safety and well-being, but it does depend on the context a little bit. So, if we take, for example, lying is sometimes referred to as a challenging behaviour, but lying we sometimes consider to be appropriate. Now you might say it's always inappropriate, but if I'm lying to protect somebody else, or to just be tactful, or to, maybe we're not telling the full truth, to protect somebody genuinely from a point of their best interests rather than their own, I wouldn't necessarily say that's wrong. When parents are saying about Santa Claus, they don't view it as being bad in some way, and yet we tell children off for lying. So I think, again, that's one of those examples that it's contextual as far as the behaviour being challenging is concerned. The same with like swearing. We might describe swearing as a challenging behaviour, and in fact some staff or some individuals will find it upsetting and difficult and hard to work with. Other people, it may just be words that are straight over the head, it doesn't bother them. So it's very much an individualised thing. But if we're working with somebody with a diagnosis of Tourette's, we couldn't say it's their challenging behaviour, in the fact that we're never going to change it, or it doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. We may still find it difficult, but we need to change what we feel about it rather than the behaviour itself. So I think that was quite a significant change, and I really agree with that one as far as shifting that terminology from defining the behaviour as challenging to looking at it as, well, we're finding it challenging. Is that actually because it is a problem rather than it's just something we don't like? So we might refer to that in a different vlog. I might do a vlog on about identifying behaviours and stuff, which is one of the things we look at in our courses. The other thing, as far as changing the language is concerned, one thing about defining or giving labels around people and their diagnoses, there's been a bit of a kind of a view on that, and there's a variety of opinions. So one of the things is, if we take dementia as an example, there's certain kind of stigmatizing behaviour of the demented. It's somebody who's senile, or they've gone crazy in old age. And you hear these kind of terms that obviously are very judgmental of that person. Dementia is one of the biggest fears that many people have. It's now considered more scary, as far as people are more scared of dementia than they are cancer nowadays. And immediately it's because of the way it's often reported to as it's an epidemic. It's the losing yourself, and these kind of ways that dementia is kind of referred to. One thing, shifting over rather than demented to a person with dementia or living with dementia, and even I do quite like a person living well with dementia, because it doesn't need to be the end. It is an illness that isn't going to get better, but it doesn't define the person. For one, they are a person with dementia, not a person with dementia. It should be the person being the focus there, and it's just a condition that unfortunately is affecting them and affecting the way they interact with the world. So I think that's quite an important thing to refer to that as a person with dementia. And I think there is certain conditions that works much more appropriately, that it's a person with that condition rather than defining a person by that condition. And that's been going for quite some time, I think. But there's a little shift back from a different point of view, and that is those of the autistic community. Because autism isn't something you catch or something you get. It's the way a person's brain works. It's essentially the way that their genes are fired or switched on within their system. So it's referred to as obviously a disorder, but in some ways, is that appropriate? Because we're defining the very way a person is, the way a person is in themselves, their personality, their traits, the way their brain works and the way they see the world, as being a disorder. So there's a bit of a shift over. So rather than a person with autism, they are just, I'm an autistic person, I'm autistic. So they're starting to define themselves by that difference, to be proud of that label a little bit. So I can completely understand that kind of philosophy. I do quite like the shifts in terminology to neurodiverse and neurotypical. So somebody with a trait like autism or ADHD is neurodiverse. Their brains work in a different way to what we might consider to be the norm or the typical. And I quite like that kind of adjustment in thinking, because it means that, again, we're not focusing on the person being wrong or this is going to be cured. We need to change the world around them rather than them around the world a little bit. Same as the challenge behaviour thing we just spoke about. There is the other one is mental health disorders or mental illnesses or mental health generally. We've shifted our terminology over that as well. So it used to be kind of mental health disorders or a mental illness. But now we're trying to separate that continuum, that it isn't just like with physical health. You can have physical health no matter how well you are. It's just a definition of, like, I have physical health and therefore it could be good or bad based on that. So I might have diabetes, for instance, but still be able to have a fulfilling life and live well. So again, it doesn't define me. So it's shifting away from that in the mental health sector as well, that somebody with whether it be depression or anxiety, I might have a diagnosis of depression, but I might still be in a good place as far as my mental well-being is currently strong, even though I still suffer with, or I still experience depression from time to time. So, like, once you've got the label of schizophrenia, it's on there kind of forever. But it doesn't mean a person's always experiencing schizophrenic symptoms or struggling in a crisis state or psychosis. Sometimes they are living very well, even though they still have that label against their name. So it's a really interesting area. I'd love to hear people's opinions on terminology related to. There's a whole different set of terminology that I get people thinking about related to the actual behaviours itself and how it's kind of referred to. But I think those things we started off with managing challenge behaviour, the shift in terminology of that, and whether you think that's important or not. And also these shifts in communication about a person with dementia or an autistic person. or even obviously the bit of controversy around Asperger's and stuff like that, and mental health. What is the best way of referring to somebody with a mental health condition? Should it be a mental health illness, or should it be just condition? Or I think it's there's pros and cons to both. So I'd love to get your opinions on that.